Now let's go over the main points of part 3. This is the most important part of today's lesson, the 6 patterns for gerund and infinitive objects. Verbs can be divided into these 6 groups. Often the main verb is followed by a second verb. The second verb must be either a gerund or an infinitive. And there are 6 patterns for gerund or infinitive objects. The first group is gerund only. Some verbs must be followed by the gerund form of a verb. For example, we enjoyed having friends over for dinner last night. What time will you finish making the PowerPoint slides? Enjoyed and finish are 2 examples of group 1 verbs. Okay, other common pattern 1 verbs you see here: admit, appreciate, dislike, feel like, miss, quit. The second pattern is infinitive only. Some verbs can only be followed by the infinitive form of a verb. Almost always it must be a full infinitive with to. Explain more about this later. Only help can be followed by a bare infinitive without to. With help, you have 2 choices. With help, to is optional. For example, I learned to swim when I was 4 years old. Could you help clean up the room? Could you help to clean up the room? Again, help is the only one where to is optional. Other common pattern 2 verbs include decide, can't afford, hope, offer, plan, promise. Some verbs fall into the third category, gerund or infinitive, same. Some verbs can be followed by either a gerund or an infinitive, and the meaning is exactly the same, whatever you want, as a general rule. Like, Skylar loves to play sports, Skylar loves playing sports. It started to rain an hour ago, it started raining an hour ago. They're both correct, same meaning. However, you should avoid putting to and ing back to back. I should say you should avoid to back to back or ing back to back. For example, it is starting to rain is a much better choice than it is starting raining. Because starting also ends with ing, it is much better to have the infinitive when you have a choice. Or it is going to start raining is much better than it is going to start to rain. To start already has to, so the gerund is better than the infinitive. This rule only works for pattern 3 verbs when you have a choice. All the others, if you have to put ing back to back or to back to back, you gotta do what you gotta do. Other common pattern 3 verbs: begin, can't stand, continue, like, love, prefer. Pattern 4, you have a choice gerund or infinitive, but the meaning changes depending on which one you use. This is a very small group, so just remember these few things. Remember and forget are the most common in this group. Use an infinitive to talk about whether something happened or not. Most of the time, you will use an infinitive. Did you remember to lock the door? Did you do it? Oops, I forgot to lock the door. I didn't do it. Don't forget to lock the door. A reminder to do it. Use a gerund to talk about memories, things that happened in the past. You did it, and now you're talking about the memory. Another one is try. This is a bit trickier. Use an infinitive when you aren't sure if you can or not. Use an infinitive after tried to show that you were unsuccessful. For example, I tried to call you last night, but you didn't answer the phone. I was unsuccessful. I will try to come to your party, but I can't promise. Use a gerund to talk about doing something for the first time, a new experience. Or use a gerund to suggest a solution to a problem. I tried scuba diving on my trip to Bali, my first time. Why don't you try hitting it with a hammer? That's my suggestion on how to fix the problem. The fifth pattern is someone to do or something to happen. Some verbs are followed by infinitives, but they must have a noun or pronoun between the main verb and the infinitive. This is the person who will do the action. This is the thing that will happen. My parents allowed me to get my driver's license when I was 16. We invited our friends to join us on our weekend trip. Other common pattern 5 verbs that must have a noun or pronoun in the middle: advise, cause, forbid, force, help, hire, remind, require, teach, and tell. Now, advise is the only verb that jumps groups. It can also be followed by a gerund like suggest or recommend. I advise you to take a foreign language next year. I advise taking a foreign language next year. However, you cannot use suggest with, for example, I suggest you to take a foreign language. No. I recommend you to take it. No. Only advise. The final pattern is actually a double pattern: to do and someone to do. Some verbs have these two patterns. They can be followed by just an infinitive, or they can have a noun or pronoun between the main verb and the infinitive. For example, I need to get a new computer. Or, I need you to send this document to the customer. When there is just an infinitive, the subject of the sentence will do the action. When there is a noun in the middle, that person will do the action. For example, we had to pay to go into the zoo. We paid and we went into the zoo. We paid our son to wash the car. We will pay our son. He will wash the car. Other common pattern 6 verbs: ask, choose, expect, want, and would. Finally, let's talk a little bit about bare infinitives. A full infinitive is to plus the base form of a verb. A bare infinitive is the base form of a verb without to. Almost always use the full infinitive with to. Help is the only time that to is optional. However, there are 2 common situations in which the bare infinitive is needed. Some causative verbs. For example, Skylar's parents made him go. This is a bare infinitive. Or, Kai let his roommate borrow his sweater. Borrow is a bare infinitive with let. Or, the manager had Sarah clean up the spill in aisle 6. Clean up is a bare infinitive. Notice that made and had are clearly in the past tense. Let is also in the past tense. But go, borrow, and clean up look like the base form. Also, verbs of perception. These are verbs that go with your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, or hands.